Tim Petrowich for Dateline, Marion. We're here with Marion head football coach Kerry Martin, and we're also here today with linebackers coach and tech specialist for the Wildcats, Darrell Wimberly, a.k.a. Coach Wimbo.
Yep.
And first of all, Coach, good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Tim. Good to be here.
We've been talking to an extra coach for the last several weeks, and it's worked out pretty well. And I know Coach Wimberly is a very popular person, not only on the side of the football sideline, but also in the entire high school and the community. So I'm sure a lot of people are interested to see what he's got to say. As usual, we're here to talk about this week's game against Carbondale. It's homecoming week and a lot of things that go with that. But first, we need to talk a little bit about last week's game.
Yeah.
And wow.
Right.
Well, it was exciting because, you mentioned the fact that it may have been the worst first half, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that your team has played in several years. In the second half, it was just a completely different football team.
It was, and I'm glad you qualified that because I thought the defense played well in the first half. The defense got a big stop early and held them to a field goal, which I think was a huge victory for us because we had given them the ball pretty deep, and the fact that we were only down 17-0 was really a pretty amazing thing because it could have been a lot worse. We just didn't move the ball. We didn't really threaten to score, and the fact that the defense kind of kept us in a game where we could make a comeback was a big part of it. And But it was two very diverse halves offensively where we didn't do much of anything. In fact, we not only didn't have success against their defense, we made a lot of self-inflicted wounds on ourselves with some fumbles, fumbled snaps that were misdirected and just didn't execute, didn't block well, missed assignments, and second half we were a completely different football team.
Coach Wimberly, you can take a look at that game now because we've talked to Coach Martin a couple times about it, but what did you see different between the first half and the second half for the Wildcats?
Honestly, I think our players was engaged in the second half. I think they saw the message that Coach Martin didn't say anything. And I think to me, sometimes when a person that speaks a lot and says a lot to a team that doesn't say anything, but when he said, "I believe I've lost this team," they went out and proved that he had not lost his team. And I think that's the most important thing. I think the difference between the first half and the second half.
We talked about some of the big stats and a big rushing game for Jordan Beverly, obviously, and Evan Noley, who's converted his game from a passing game to a running game this year. He had a solid game in the first half, but the thing I keep going back to is those first three plays in the second half when Centralia had the ball and Michael Gunn makes a stop on their quarterback who's it's a designed run, and then the next play is a pass and he's scrambling and tries to run out of trouble and Michael tackles him again, so you got a 2-yard gain, a no gain, and then on third down Michael's there to chase the quarterback again. Looked like it might have been a fumble. It was ruled an incomplete pass, but just 3 plays in a row by Michael at that point early in the third quarter, and it just seemed like the team fed off of that, and that was the turning point of the game.
Well, I didn't. Wimbo was right. I didn't know what to say at halftime, except I basically kind of apologized for the fact that it's somewhere along the line I felt we were lost 2 previous games. We were losing the half, and I felt, and it sometimes happens, you can lose a team in the midst of a season, and I didn't know what to say to him. If I'd have had some great inspirational speech, I would have given it. I was at a loss because I didn't know. I'd missed the week before from COVID, and I thought the coaches did a good job of coaching in that ball game, but at some point I just felt like we had lost our way a little bit, and it looked that way. But the defense played so well, and I think Wimbo and Coach Dunning did such a good job of, I didn't have much to say at halftime, but they did give some inspiring words before we took the field and challenged the players. And I that's why you hire great people, because in the absence of my words, they had some words to say, and I think they made a difference. And Wimbo challenged them to set the tone with the first possession. And Centralia came out with the ball up 17-0 at home. And you're right, our defense got the stop, and I think that's where the momentum began. It didn't begin with an offensive drive; it began with a defensive stop.
Yeah. And then from that point on, it was just basic football. But Jordan and Evan, whenever it was their turn, And I had a lot of fun watching Jordan run the ball because you see guys that get the ball and they try to sprint to the line and try, or whatever. And he kept kind of just being patient and watching and waiting. And all of a sudden the hole would open up and he'd shoot through it. And now you got 8, 10, 12 yards at a time. And 227 yards is a lot of yards. But none of them, his longest run was 17. So it was all, it was very, I call it a workmanlike performance.
It was. It reminded me of Henry Jones's performance at Normandy in 2012, where I don't think he had a long run the whole day, but he set a school record for rushing yards on a single game. And I think this was a similar type performance where it was 6, 7, 8, 12, just those kind of gains. Even if he got stopped for a 2 or 3 yard gain, the next time we would come back, he'd get 6 or 8 or 10 more. And we've got to give credit to the offensive line. Got to give credit to the backs like Tommy Wiseman had an unbelievable game blocking for Jordan. Our H-backs, which are 3 guys, Jamel and Michael Gunn, and Maurice Marvin did a great job. Our tight ends, Talon and Bryson. And it's that collective offensive line. I mean, I'm real proud of the fact that those 5 kids up front played a hard-nosed game. Garrett Berenson, Holden Hyde, Eli Vickery, Levi Tanner, and Sloan Orlovich. Those 5 guys, we don't get to mention their names often enough. Those 5 kids who struggled in the first half, played so well and so physical and so aggressive in the second half. And Wimbo's right. It almost becomes like just a mindset, a focus, an engagement that all of a sudden there was purpose in the way we played. And same plays, same team, same kids, same coaches. But when you arrive at a purpose for what you're doing, good things happen.
Got to ask you this, Wimbo. For several years, Marion's been known for having good, solid linebackers. And, a lot of people say they have some talent. People say it's the coaching, whatever. You got put into a tough position in the last week because you lost one of the best linebackers that ever played at this school in Brody Larson. And so you have to plug a hole and you have to coach these guys up to be able to overcome that. And your leading tackler was the new guy. Marion Owen had 9 tackles last week, and it seemed like he was wherever the ball was, and he played a lot like Brody does.
Yeah, well, our philosophy as a team is next man up. And we talked to AO, we call him AO, Marion. We said, hey, we're depending on you. But you know what? He was coming through, and he stepped up. And he made some great plays, which is what we needed. He can't replace Brody, but I think he kind of fills that gap to help the other. And then the other thing is the rest of the defense. We talked about the veteran players, the ones that have the experience. You've got to pick these young guys up. Cooper Thompson, he's still a young guy, but he's got some game experience now, if you will, and he's starting to make some plays for us. Jordan Beverly, as good as he played on offense, again, in that second half, they were hurting us on the edge at times. He came through, knifed through, and made a play, and I think, again, said, hey, we're not letting you do this anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that is a collective on defense, but Coach Dunn and I, we kind of looked at it and said, hey, let's get our best 11 on the field. And AO was one of those best 11, and he came through and played well for us.
As much experience as Brody had coming into this season to be a leader, you've got a guy now who's played all season, who's been among your leading tacklers in Toxie Rudd, and it seems like he's kind of stepping up into that leadership role too.
Yeah, I've been truly blessed as a linebacker coach because, I've had players that didn't start their freshman, sophomore, and junior year. Their senior year, they became the guy. They had to wait their turn.
It's true.
To come up and play that position. Toxie is a great example of that. He had to wait his turn. This is his turn. He's a great leader for me. I can trust him. Okay, if he makes a mistake, he's going to make it full speed, and that's what I like about him. And AO's another same thing good about him. We said, coach and staff said about him, if he makes a mistake, he's making it full speed, and that's what I like about Toxie. He's engaged in the game. He's a great teammate. And he's a great leader.
It seems like he's a pretty smart football player, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, and again, we could put him in positions to help us. And, some guys, again, you have to keep it simple. With him, I can say, hey, here's your job, but if this happens, I need you to take care of that. And he can make those adjustments.
So we're in a situation now that I don't remember ever seeing and I was thinking about this. I've been in Marion for 25 years. And there's an opportunity on Friday night, if everything happens the right way, that the night ends with a 4-way tie for first place in the South 7 Conference. Is that something you've ever seen before?
I never didn't even, to be honest with you, I didn't know that was possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
We've had 3 before.
Yeah,
but
we've talked about how crazy this season has been, and that just seems like it would be the icing on the cake.
It would, because we've talked about the analytics not matching up. We've talked about the score comparisons, and then using that to predict the outcome of the next week's games, and none of them match up. There were games last week that nobody predicted, including our win over Centralia, and it's no one thought Carbondale was going to beat Althoff, and they did, and it just over and over again. You're right. A perfect way to end this season would be to see a 4-way tie, to be part of the chaos and the mess that is the 2022 football season. And I've talked to a lot of coaches beyond our conference, and they feel like it's been that kind of year where they're at. I don't know what's in the air. It's like it's full moon type football every single week, but I tell you what, it makes it exciting because you don't know what's going to happen.
Is this the kind of a hangover from playing 2 seasons in just a short period of time and then going back to a regular full year before you play a season?
Well, we might as well blame COVID on this too. So, I blame COVID for everything else, but maybe there's some truth to it. I don't know the answer to it. I think there's a lot of evenly matched teams. I don't like the word parity necessarily, because sometimes people equate parity with mediocrity, but there is a lot of parity in our conference. I think on any given night, for the first time, and I think in my 21 years here, I think the first time on any Friday night, anybody can beat anybody.
I think there's been some rivalries in the conference, not just for Marion, but other teams, and so each game is a big game. So it goes beyond even a conference game. It just becomes a rivalry game.
One of those things where maybe, like you expect Marion against Carbondale or Mount Vernon against Centralia, but now all of a sudden Cahokia and Mount Vernon turns into a rivalry, and Centralia, Marion, and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I can remember when Coach Martin first got here, we talked about the big 3. We said Cahokia, Mount Vernon, and Althoff. And then Centralia got good. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And Carbondale's always had great athletes.
And always played well against us.
Always played well against us, So you can see how we don't get any nights off. No, we don't. And so obviously you see some of the other conference schools doesn't either. So.
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, you used to go into a season and you take a sheet of paper and you could go, got a good chance at winning that one, good chance at winning that one. That's going to be a struggle. That's going to be a struggle. And you could almost bet on being pretty close to correct when the season was over. Throw that out. Yeah. I don't have any idea. I think anything can happen in this game on Friday against Carbondale. I think there's hardly anything that will occur score-wise and that would surprise anybody. I mean, I don't know. I just, like I said, you can't. There's just no way to predict some of the outcomes of these games. I think Carbondale is playing their best football right now. Dadgummit, we're trying to finish strong, and they go around and play their best football right now. How dare they? But that's a tribute to Coach Lee, and it's a tribute to the coaching staff that their kids haven't quit on them. And I think that says a lot about the coach, the program. And really in the end, that's a good thing, because now we are having to prep at the highest level possible to try to get in those playoffs, put together a winning streak. And Carbondale's making us better by doing that. And now we got to go out and prove we're worth making the playoffs of beating a good football team.
Well, let's talk about that Carbondale game, and let's talk about Carbondale in particular, because their last 2 games, they played against the 2 teams that beat you in the conference, and they took Mount Vernon to the wire. Mount Vernon had to run a kickoff back for a touchdown at the end to win the game. And then they turned around and they beat Althoff last week. And I don't know if you saw the game-winning play or not. They had a field goal in the final seconds, and the kid hit the upright and bounced off the crossbar and went over for a good field goal to win 10-7. So, things are kind of bouncing their way, and they played some good football, and now they bring to the table the rivalry game factor and the fact that there's been some really wild football games between Marion and Carbondale. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, they always play well against us. It's a rival game, and no matter what the records are, I mean, they're going to play inspired against the Wildcats. It's our homecoming. It's our senior night. You love to disrupt those things if you're the opponent. And they have a very balanced offense between run and pass. They've got a returning starting quarterback, and they've got a very, very aggressive athletic defense that can cause problems. I mean, they like to kind of wreak havoc in there. So it's a big challenge for us. We're excited about it, but we got to bring our A game for sure.
You talk about the athletes they have, and their big running back Gabe Hillard, who seemed like he was there forever, has finally graduated. But just like a lot of times with Marion and some of the other ones, you have some other athletes who fill those holes, and I'm sure they've got those.
They do, and they have some good receivers again, even though they graduated some good receivers that have been starting since their sophomore year, like Hilliard had, and. But I'm sure people are wondering where Patrick Walker came from. I bet there's people wondering after Lucas Schrum rushed for 1,000 yards, where did they get Jordan Beverly? So, I mean, I think that's, to me, the biggest difference between coaching in the South 7 and coaching in other conferences I've coached in is that ability of teams to stay at that level and to graduate good players or have a good player get injured and you can fill that spot. When I've coached at smaller schools I've been at, that was more difficult to do. It didn't mean you couldn't do it, but when you lost a good tailback who'd started for 2 or 3 years, it was tough to reload that. Tough to reload that good quarterback. And the South 7 has the ability to replace really, really talented players with new talented players. And so that is the edge I think the larger schools have, is that ability to replace quality players due to injury or graduation and do it well.
We've talked quite a bit about the defensive line for the Wildcats. We haven't talked a whole lot about the linebackers up until today and a few times, but you take Brody out of the equation, you still have AO, you still have Jordan, you still have Toxie, you still have Cooper, who we talked about him not playing and then playing again, and now you're 7-8 games into the season, so those guys have developed experience, and even with Brody on the sideline now, you've got a group of experienced guys who have shown some ability to be really good.
Yeah, and and also hats off to Brody, because when we're in practice, he's actually coaching up AO. Yeah. He's actually giving some pointers to Cooper. Yeah. So I
he
think
was doing that on the sideline at the game Friday
night.
Too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of it, though. I mean, and again, so I think you're correct. And look at these guys, and we're right now, we're looking at week 8. And so right now we're saying these guys are seasoned. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? They're not newbies anymore. Okay,
we can't
especially with the schedule we play.
That's right.
Does that make sense? So I think all my backers are tested right now. We expect them to come through. They expect to come through. Okay, and so I think we'll have to come out, and we again, Carbondale, they've got 2 running backs they use. Mm-hmm. They've got a great receiving crop that we have to make sure we address, because they can break it at any time. But anyway, it's a thing where we've got to just cover the whole field and be solid.
That's right.
So you guys have both dealt with this not only from the coaching standpoint, but from the student standpoint as far as your interaction with the students. But it is homecoming week.
Yeah.
And so how do you make sure that the kids, and we've asked this question several times, and I think it's different with each group, but how do you make sure that the kids can enjoy homecoming week but not have the distractions that cause them to not be focused on Friday's game?
Well, Coach Martin put some parameters out there. You have to. You really do. You have to put some parameters out there. Things that are okay to do, things are probably not good to do. Okay, and but the other side of it is we have one job. It's to win the football game.
That's right.
And that's what we have to keep in mind. You can have fun. You can go be in the parade. You can do all these other things. The seniors dance, whatever the cheerleaders, whatever they do. But at the end of the day, and each day this week, we have to get focused. When we step on that practice field, we have to get focused. We got to get in game mode as soon as we step on that field. So we talked about switching gears from an activity and I don't call them distractions. I said I refuse to call it distraction, because a distraction is a distraction if you allow it to distract you.
Right.
Okay. But if you look at it as an activity, you find a way to get from that activity back on track, and it goes back to focus.
So there's a lot riding on Friday's game.
Yes.
I mean, not only is it homecoming week, but it's Carbondale.
Right.
And it's a shot at the South 7 Conference.
Right.
And it's continuing to control your own destiny as far as the playoffs go, because we've discussed the fact that you really need to win these last 2 games to make sure. 5-4 is no guarantee for this year. So Do all those things help with that focus?
Sure.
Do you think?
I think so. I mean, I think we try to flip this homecoming a little bit on its head. When I first got here, homecoming here was a bigger deal than any place I'd been. It is a full week, something every day activity. He's right. Some kids handle that well, and it stays an activity. Some kids don't, and it becomes a distraction. So what I decided, and I fought it. I remember 2005, we were on the verge of making the playoffs for the first time. We had to win the last 2 games to make it happen. And I didn't let the kids ride in the parade. And I think a lynch mob was forming in town to come and take me away, and because I guess I was so worried about the game, I didn't really understand how big a deal that was for the kids not to be in the parade. I've learned since then I can't do that. That's not fair to the kids, not fair to the parents, the community, the school kids that gather on the side of the road and
That want to see those football
players. It was a selfish act by me, but I was doing it with the intention of protecting my kids from that. Okay, the parade takes off, you guys go home and get off your feet. They probably went home and, and didn't focus like I would hope they would. My point being, I've learned to try to use whatever's taking place at school as a reminder to the kids, we got a big game coming up. This isn't a normal week of school. Every time there's a powder puff or there's a pep assembly or something, remember this is a reminder we have a big game coming up. So I think we tried to flip that on its head a bit and say, okay, so beginning Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every day you're reminded of this is a big week, this is a big deal in this town, it's a big deal to our school, so focus on it. And Wimbo's right. We got to come to practice and be able to flip that switch from activity and think about what is our job for the next hour and a half, 2 hours of practice. And the parameters help. We've got parade rules for how to ride in the parade. But I am really excited at about 4:30 on Friday when the kids finally come back for the game, and I've got them.
Yes.
And the only thing left for us to do is to play the game. It's a challenge. It is. There's no doubt about it. I cannot think of a head coach I know that thinks homecoming is awesome for the season. But it is part of what we do, and rather than fight it, you got to learn how to manage it.
All those things I talked about, Carbondale, homecoming, classes coming back for reunions, senior parents being here and family members and things like that, those are also going to create or enhance what has become one of the best high school football atmospheres in Southern Illinois, if not the entire state. Yeah. That's going to make it that much bigger Friday.
I agree. There's a lot that takes place here on any given Friday night. We have a lot of themes. We have Patriot Night. We have Pink Out. We have all kinds of themes, and I think each one is amazing and embraces a different facet of our community. And I think it's become more than just a football game. It's become a chance to see our amazing band, our dance squad, our cheerleaders, all the different people that are selling products around. It's like a carnival wrapped around a football game, wrapped around a concert. It's pretty special. It really is. I've had a lot of people who aren't from here, who come here, maybe their team's on the road or whatever, and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, the atmosphere was unbelievable." I think almost to a fault sometimes. I think we energize our opponents sometimes. Our atmosphere is so good because we play some places there's not much atmosphere.
Yeah, not atmosphere. We got to create our own atmosphere.
And so I think some of our opponents come here and get pumped up because it's electric. It's awesome, and we're very blessed for the facility and all the different groups that make up how special this is. And of course, our fans and our Marion maniacs are just amazing. So, it's a pretty cool place to be on a Friday night.
I tell you what, with the age of technology, and we didn't get much into that, and some of it's kind of secretive, and you sharing secrets and things like that. One thing I miss though, in the last couple of years, is when Coach Wimbo gets to the huddle after the game and he pulls out the sheet with the dry erase marker, puts a big check mark on there, and then everybody goes crazy. I kind of missed that the last couple of years.
He might do that this week because this ball game has a lot of ramifications. It's got senior night and homecoming, and maybe he'll make a checklist and do that just for you.
There you go. That's right.
All right, so it's Friday night, homecoming, senior night here at Wildcat Stadium, Marion Wildcats and the Carbondale Terriers. This is linebackers coach and tech specialist and Coach Wimbo. That's how we know him. And that's Marion head football coach Kerry Martin. For Dateline Marion, I'm Tim Petrowich.